Welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, the place where deep listening becomes a daily revolution. I'm your host, Shreya, and tonight we are joined by AmiLynne Carroll, author, TEDx speaker. In a world that screams for our attention, her message is very simple, radical, and healing. Trust the still, small voice within. So let's pause the world and lean in. Welcome, AmiLynne. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Hi, Shreya. Thank you so much for the invite. I feel honored to be here with you and your listeners.
Thank you so much for joining. And Ameline, what does the still small voice mean to you? And how do we know it's not just our mind talking?
Oh, what a great question. And nothing like just jumping right in to a big question to get things started. I think for me, the still small voice, it's important to remember that the still small voice speaks differently to everyone. And so I can't tell you what the still small voice is going to sound like in your experience, but what I can tell you is what it's going to feel like. And this, for me, the still small voice is that resonance with truth. And truth is that divine idea that doesn't always say what we want it to say, doesn't always unfold the way we want it to unfold, but there's just a sense of knowing that this is the right path. This is the right voice. And so it's so interesting when we talk about the still small voice is that so many of us expect it to shout at us.
Hmm.
And yet the still small voice is right there within its name. It is still, it's calm. It is small. It's not boisterous and flamboyant. And it's a voice, but a voice can speak to us in so many different ways. Sometimes we feel it in our bodies. Sometimes we hear it in our mind. Sometimes we hear it in the birds singing or the trees, the wind moving through the trees. And so we get to learn how to recognize the still small voice in our own experience, and as we get to learn what it sounds like and feels like, we also get to learn how to trust it. Because, as you said, the ego can be a mischievous travel partner, and the ego can sometimes cloak itself. And we think that we're listening to the still small voice. But usually, for me, the biggest indicator is the answer that I'm getting or the guidance that I'm getting, is it directed for the good of all, even if it's not comfortable for me? That is divine. That is divine mind. That is the still small voice. The still small voice is good for all. Ego, it's all about me. What's in it for me? Am I going to get the accolade? Am I going to get the recognition? Am I going to feel happy? So it's that for me, the differentiator is what's coming to me all about me? And that's ego. Or is it about loving all of mankind and doing what is right and principled for those around me as well as myself in that moment, which that is the indicator of the still small voice.
Just explained it so beautifully. And also, what is the first sign that we have stopped trusting it?
Well, I think for me, the first sign that we have stopped trusting or have yet to begin trusting our still small voice is that we feel a sense of conflict. And we might not be able to put our finger on what the conflict is, but we feel like we're out of alignment. We're not sure we belong. We're not sure that the decisions we're making are clear or purposeful or aligned. And so when we've got that discord, and sometimes it's just a little rubbing that something's not right, and sometimes it's really loud. Like, this is not me not doing that. But when we begin to feel that conflict, For me, that's not a bad thing because it's an invitation to pause and assess, to ask that question, am I listening to divine guidance or am I listening to ego? And then to make a decision, how am I going to show up in the next moment? Based on recognition that if I was listening to ego, I need to shift. I get to shift. And if it was divine mind that was guiding me, that still small voice, then I can continue on that path. So that conflict is really what wakes us up to the fact that maybe we're not listening to that still small voice. Maybe we're listening a little bit more to ego. And so it's an invitation to pay attention, make a new decision, and begin again.
Yes. And also, you have worked with many seekers. Why do you think we so often silence our inner wisdom?
Well, I think silencing the inner wisdom is simply a habit that we get into, and it's an unconscious habit because the world would tell us, regardless of where you're listening into this conversation from, whether you're in Asia or Europe or the Americas, North America, South, it matters not where you're listening in from. Society would tell us that we need to act a certain way to be accepted. We need to look a certain way to belong. We need to conduct ourselves in a certain way to fit in, which is all surface. It's all superficial. And it meets man's expectations. And so we, out of a sense of simply wanting to belong, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to belong, but we tend to listen more readily to the external voices. And sometimes the voices are parents. They don't want us to feel awkward. They want us to fit in. Sometimes it's our teachers. Our teachers want us to conduct ourselves in a certain way so that we can grow and transform and learn, and so that they can have a positive reflection on us. So it's not that people are meaning to harm us, but they set these expectations externally that might very well be out of alignment with that internal voice, that internal calling, that divine mind, that eternal whisper of the still small voice. And because there's so much on the outside, it's easier to listen to, right? Absolutely. We all fall into that trap. It's when we begin to recognize that the noise is not going to go away, that we get to start preparing ourselves better, whether we're taking 5 minutes every now and again throughout the day, whether we're starting our day from a place of calm and peace. Shreya, I will often, and I was told this from someone else, this is not my own analogy, but the saying that anyone can meditate in a monastery or an ashram or in the middle of a peaceful lake. But if you really want to test your meditation or your contemplation muscle, go to a mall or a market the eve of a big holiday where people are rushing around. They're looking, there's an urgency and there's an expectation. And if you can meditate, if you can get calm and pray, if you can be contemplative in the midst of that seeming chaos, then you know that you are doing a good job of building that muscle of learning to listen to that still small voice. So it's not that we've done anything wrong that would take us away from hearing that still small voice, because we have been prepared by those around us, all of those voices, so many of them loving, wanting us to do well in this world, that we forget to really listen to that internal voice. And so we get to just make a new choice. When we recognize that we think we're probably listening to external voices versus that internal divine voice, we get to stop, we get to pause, and we get to begin again and again and again and again because it takes practice to be present to a place where we can consistently hear the still small voice, even amongst all of the external noise.
Yes, that is so beautiful that the world conditions us to outsource truth, but the truth is often already whispering inside.
Yes. And that's why so often when someone says something and it resonates, we're not hearing something new.
Mm.
We're hearing something that our soul knows to be true. And so that resonance isn't about right or wrong. It's about bringing us home back to ourself, back to what we know to be true. We're not learning something new. We're simply remembering what God has provided to us from the very beginning. And that resonance is the reminder that that still small voice is always present, even when we're not listening.
Yes, yes. And also, your life charter work emphasizes sacred self direction. So, how does that help someone build trust in their own voice again?
Well, it's a really great question. And I'm going to shift your question just a little bit because for us, our aim is not to help them learn to trust their voice, but to learn to trust the voice of the divine because our voice is oftentimes the voice of ego. And so when we come home to who we've always been, but forgot along the way because of this external patterning, this external positioning and expectation and conditioning, is we begin to take those steps back home to who we've always been, but forgot along the way. And in those moments, we are learning not to listen to our own voice, but to listen to the voice of the divine. Because in our truest essence, Shreya, while we are individuals here having a human experience, we are all nothing more and nothing less than the very expression of God.
Yes,
That voice is always God's. And no matter what you call God, that voice is always God. God doesn't care what you call him. God doesn't care if you give him a gender, if you don't, if you call him from one language to another. Our scriptural texts across all faith backgrounds say that God is known by many names, but God is not known by a human name, such as AmiLynne or Shreya. The
yes,
voice of God belongs to God, and we are the very expression of God. So in our life charter program, we're coming back to that root, that foundation of who am I in God's eyes as God's expression, especially in the moments that challenge us most, because those are the ones where we find ourselves falling away from that still small voice and the guidance that it would provide, and falling more toward the external expectations of telling us how to solve a problem, how to fix something. But we learn in the Life Charter program, there's nothing to fix because you, my friend, you are not broken. You may have forgotten who you are as God's child, as God's expression. But the thing about forgetting is it also offers an opportunity to remember and to come home into that space of being that divine expression. And we work through that in the Life Charter program in very meaningful and practical ways. Because we can sit here in prayer and contemplation, but if we can't bring the exercises into our daily life, into the conflict with the people that we work with, into the disagreements that we may have with our loved ones, into parenting, the way that we know that we're called to parent. If we can't bring the work that we're doing in the life charter into those practical relationships, then it has no value. As I have practiced living in this space of a more divine consciousness, there are instances every day that get to come up for me where I get to choose. Am I going to follow that still small voice, that guidance that I know to be true? Or am I going to follow what the world would expect? And one example of that would be I recently had a misunderstanding with a friend, and they misunderstood something that I had said. Now, the old me, it would have been important that they understand where they were wrong, how they misunderstood, and then to take accountability and see that. But someone else's understanding or belief of me does not define my identity. God defines my identity. And so this time, I had to get really quiet and listen for, do I even need to correct the misunderstanding? And if I'm feeling called to correct the misunderstanding, can I do it from a place of humility and grace? Always being aligned with the integrity of divine mind. In the past, how dare you say something like that? You know that's not me. But now I'm learning that sometimes a misunderstanding doesn't need to be corrected, because to correct it gives it power. Now, sometimes we need to correct a misunderstanding, but when we do that correction, when we do that realignment, when we course correct, we do it from a place of love and grace and humility. And Shreya, I'll use an example for you that all of us can understand. If we haven't flown, we at least understand the concept of flying on a plane. And in the cockpit are usually at least three individuals. We have the pilot, we have the co-pilot.
Mm.
Then we have who is probably one of the most important people on that team, and that's the navigator. And let's say we're going to take a flight from the United States to Europe.
Mm.
The navigator's job is to pay attention to things like weather and wind and turbulence, and to make small course corrections along the way, so that as that weather comes into being, as other airline or airplanes might be on a similar path, to course correct, so that unbeknownst to us who are sitting back in the cabin reading or sleeping or playing a game or talking with a loved one or meeting a new friend, look, when we arrive at our destination, we have no understanding at all of how many times our flight required course correction because of the external elements going on in the world, so that we could arrive at our intended destination. And so in our day-to-day life, instead of vilifying, instead of calling transition or change toxic, what if we were to look at it as these small course corrections, so that when there is a misunderstanding, look, we're just going to course correct. We're going to bring to light what was true. Whether they receive that or not is none of our business. That's between them and God.
Yeah.
So it's course correcting so that we can remain in alignment. And that alignment is not just our alignment with God, but that alignment is our alignment with our true expression with those around us as well.
And if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
Oh, what a sweet invitation. Thank you, Shreya. And I invite anyone who would like to reach out. I'm sure in the show notes, you will have the proper spelling of my name, AmiLynne Carroll. And here's the easy thing. Everything is my name. My website is AmiLynne Carroll. My Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, you got a social, threads, I'm there. It's all AmiLynne Carroll. So very easy to remember. I also want to invite your listeners to understand that sometimes just feeling listened to is healing for us. And so on my website, I have a widget where you can literally leave me a voicemail message. I respond to every message and I respond with a voice message back. It'll go into your inbox for your email. But sometimes when we want to talk about these things that can be challenging, sitting down and writing an email on a contact us form can be really kind of, well, uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But leaving a voicemail message where I can hear your heart,
Mm.
where I can know, look, I want to sit with you in your discomfort. And then to be able to respond back to you, hopefully in a way that will help you navigate that discomfort in a way that feels right for you. So just reach out to me. Again, all of my socials, everything online is my first and last name, AmiLynne Carroll. And I so look forward to sharing space with you, with your listeners, with whoever's reaching out to just simply be with another human being.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all the details and links below. So the experiences, the stories, the knowledge you have shared, it just means so much for us and my listeners. And to all my listeners, tonight AmiLynne Carroll reminded us that peace doesn't come from answers outside. Still small voice, it's not just your intuition, it's your compass. So the next time the world tells you that what you should do, pause, breathe, and ask, what do I already know? Because the deepest healer you will ever meet is you.